All right, this is Tony with me, Anthony Olensky. Today's guest is Max. I know Max Cutler. We know
Mm.
each other for a while. We actually recorded we had a little episode inside our former employer. We did a little podcast,
Humans of Choco.
unofficial Humans of Choco podcast. Maybe
Mhm.
someone will dig it out. And this is a bonus episode, actually, or I maybe call it Christmas special. But I invited Max over because I wanted to talk to him slash with him about Berlin, how he found himself here, and um, kind of more diving a little bit deeper into the Berlin club scene and what it is.
Mm.
So I might kick off with a little quote. I found it on the berlinclubs.com
BerlinClubs.com. I don't know.
website.
I don't know
I
about that.
think that's right.
Mhm.
And because I was curious about the history before actually, just having the conversation with you. And it goes disorienting, mind blowing, brutal, fun, surprising, long lasting, and freaky. Berlin is probably the best clubbing city in Europe. The clubber culture has become a lifestyle and music is a religion. You may wonder why the nightlife is so intense in the city. Berlin's transformation into the world techno capital is very much linked to the German reunification and the fall of the Berlin Wall. As the wall came down, so did all the previous patterns of behavior. People were taking advantage of their recently acquired freedom, which is why the clubbing scene developed in such a unique way and over such a short period of time. Inside abandoned factories and commercial buildings that had to be taken down, clubs started to mushroom at full speed. Looking to express themselves, Berliners found inside those clubs a new identity.
Very nice. Very nice.
So why like okay, I get this, like, but also like the wall or like communism was brought down in like, I don't know, dozens of like a dozen countries or so in the 90s.
Yeah.
But why is Berlin so special and why is the club scene here so big from your perspective?
I mean, I think historically, like I've read about some things, been told about some things, but by no means an expert. I mean, I think the essence of it, I guess, practically speaking, is that there was suddenly the center of the city, which had previously been an undesirable place to live and work, became uh, in the middle and also very desirable. And there was all these spaces that were begging to be used. So that was sort of the practical reason why this began. I mean, there was already some things beginning in the late '80s in West Berlin. Um, the background of West Berlin itself was that it was also a place of misfits and strange folk. One reason was that if you lived in West Berlin, you didn't have to enlist in the West German army. So a lot of people who were sort of politically uninterested in that would come here, and that was like a kind of a perk of living here and of contributing to the economy.
Really? So
Yeah.
people would move from the West
Hmm.
just to avoid being enrolled in
Yeah,
the
conscription.
military.
Yeah, indeed. So that was one thing that sort of was an attracting force for these sort of alternative types. And yeah, music was a big thing here.
But wasn't it like super oppressive on the other side of the wall? Like you'd still consider moving here because you don't want to get conscripted
Oppressive where in West Germany?
east. Like you're saying,
No,
like
no, no. I'm saying if you were a West German citizen,
yeah,
so what we call now Germany, and
yeah.
you lived in Hamburg or something, you would have to sign up for the army. But if you lived in West Berlin, you did not.
Oh, West Berlin was the only place that. Okay, cool,
Yeah.
got it.
And yeah, so that was like one of the things that contributed to that. But then obviously also you have like the whole history of Berlin, the crazy nightlife that is shown in, for instance, like Babylon Berlin, like the whole Weimar era, where it really looks a lot like it does today. So there's like a long historical precedent for this. The reason for that, I still am not really certain.
Weimar is like what, the 1920s, 30s, right?
20s and 30s, yeah. So in the interwar period, um, yeah, same idea. You had all these cabarets and brothels and so on and so forth. And in many ways, what we have today or what we've had in
But
the
it's not like
last,
Hemingway came here in the 20s, right? Like all the people who kind of wanted to live it up and were kind of expressive, they went to Paris.
there were a bunch of scenes. I can't really speak to
Okay,
the
yeah.
comparison of them, but things were definitely happening here. And yeah, I mean, what it is today, like why? I guess the question is why why is it as described in the quote, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess there's both sort of like like kind of practical factors again, and then there's like more.
Maybe make it a little more personal, like, why did you end up here? 'Cause,
Mm,
that's a good starting point.
yeah, maybe I tell a bit of my backstory,
Yeah.
and sort of maybe that will contextualize how I entered and why it is the way why it is the way it is for me today. Yeah, so I am from America. I was born in Manhattan, and then I was moved to the suburbs of Connecticut when I was 3. My parents are American. My grandparents are American. I have, yeah, ancestry going back to Europe, but not since the early 20th century. So I'm really a
Why is that important?
full American. No, I mean it's just like it's important because what I'm about to say is that like I guess when I was like a teenager, I developed a sort of like uh, Sehnsucht, longing, a glance towards Europe as like sort of this place where maybe I would feel more uh, part of things, comfortable, so to say. Not that where I'm from is like super American or like not very European. It's one of the more European parts of America, I would
Mm.
say, New York and the area around it. But still, I was always looking here for some reason, and yeah, I went to university in the U.S. in Philadelphia, and then while I was there, I studied in Paris, so I had my first little European experience there. And when I was there, I actually like I think I kind of we can curse here, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
you do.
I kind of fucked myself a bit because I lived alone and like sought really to push myself into like this adult situation where I was like, not really going out. I was just like, working, going to school all day, coming home, making myself some pasta and going to bed, even though I was like, 20 years old and with no responsibilities. Not the right move.
You were the good boy.
I was the good boy. I was the good boy because I thought that that was what one ought to do. It wasn't that I thought that it was moral or something per se. I just thought that that's what I wanted because that would be the most authentic thing. I think this topic of authenticity hopefully will pervade throughout the discussion because it's actually a core component of much,
Were
especially
you
this.
maybe it was just, like, more basic where you wanted to do good at school and, like, you thought you had to have some sort of routine in order to
No, it had
no.
nothing to do with that. I actually I've always been a reluctant student. I did okay always, but only enough to get to where I needed to go. And when I was in Paris, I did really enjoy the courses. It was like they had some really great professors and topics, but that
Was it
was
in
not.
French and English?
It was in English. But I did not. That was not the reason at all.
Okay.
Like actually not. It was because I wanted to.
Was this
Uh,
your first, step into, like, I guess, adulthood where you weren't living oh, 'cause I guess, like, in college, you're also living like, not you weren't staying with your parents, right?
no, in college, I was living with my fraternity brothers in a very wild and
Okay, so you already experienced that, and then you come to France and you get an apartment, you go to school, and you just cook pasta and go to bed,
mm,
10 p.m.,
mm.
nothing.
No, I mean, I was doing stuff. I was mostly on the weekends visiting other cities. This is sort of the classic American um, Auslandssemester student, abroad semester. Um, yeah, because when we come over here, we think that we're not going to come back anytime soon. That's always like sort of in the backs of our minds. So we try to travel as much as possible. So most weekends I was away from Paris, which also then impairs your ability to make friends and do fun shit because
Yeah.
you're away when that shit's happening. There was a group of people I remember pretty interesting. They were like, I remember there's like these two girls. They were like nice, like half Asian girls from England. They were very like down to party, like quite definitely wild. I remember they also had a bit of an interest in me, let's say, and I sort of resisted them, and I think that I could have hung out with them and maybe had some of the experiences that I will probably talk about very shortly. Maybe then rather than in the last year or two, but maybe that was the right thing for me as well.
Mm.
I think ultimately it was based on this delusion of that the more adult you act, the more certainty and understanding you will get from the world, which is not really true. I would say it's actually the opposite.
Were you afraid also of letting go?
Yeah, I reckon probably a little bit. I mean, we're going to talk about substances on this, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, then I was not taking anything really. Was smoking lots of weed. That was my big thing in college. In Paris, I was also, but not as much as I was back home. But yeah, in general, I did not consider myself interested in some of these more lubricating substances, let's say.
Mm.
So yeah, that was maybe a part of it. But I also just didn't really understand that there was a culture, like a youth culture in Europe that is predicated on electronic music and dancing and raving and all of this stuff, which is, I mean, it's fundamentally true. I see this with my peers as well and my friends here in Europe. Like, when you go to, say, Rome on holiday or wherever, like one of the things that you do there is that you go out and find a club and go dancing and sort of sample what it's like to go out there. As we know, they don't compare to Berlin, but it's still something. And like, yeah, it's sort of a rite of passage that every like sort of young European does, as far as I understand it. Not all, but many. In America, it's not like that. We don't have that as part of our culture. People go to like festivals, maybe like the Coachellas of the world, or there's like the shit in New York. It's like the Gov Ball, very commercial pop thing. But in general, it's not really a thing.
Mm.
And what we do in our rite of passage is we go to university and we like play beer pong and tailgate and drink lots of beer and have probably more like hookups and shit than here, I reckon. Um, so that's really what we do there. And again, I
I never
wasn't
thought about it that way.
I wasn't familiar with what went on here, so I didn't have it
But
in my
you don't
mind.
have to have anything. You just need to be curious, right? You're a 20-year-old guy,
Mhm.
kid almost, like in France for the first time studying. Interesting that you were thinking
I,
like
w- I
that.
was curious to meet people for sure, and like understand people's ways of life, like in a kind of a broad sense. But I guess that curiosity did not go down to like going out. But I guess I also didn't develop an appreciation for this music. Then I've always been music's been a huge thing in my life, but I didn't get that until then, until recently. So, but
Fair enough.
yeah.
So Paris was like first, or France, first taste of Europe.
Mhm.
Went back to New York, finished your degree,
Yep.
and then you thought, okay, I want to be back in Europe. That's where I felt.
Yeah. So I mean, the story in terms of the details goes like this. I was working at a venture capital fund in New York, um, and yeah, it was my between my penultimate and last year of university, and was trying to figure out what I would do after I graduated. Was looking at like some government programs where you could like go and take courses and teach English and stuff, things like that. But then I got connected to a venture capitalist here in Berlin, one that had done a deal with the fund that I was working with at the time. Long story short, got an offer for them to join after my graduation, but I couldn't get a visa for that position while I was back home. But I had a plane ticket to come to Berlin, so I said, you know what, fuck it, I'll just come, see what happens. I have nothing else planned. I have this plane
All your
ticket.
friends were probably like they were getting jobs right in the U.S. and graduating, staying there, and you felt like you want to take this leap of faith and come to Berlin.
Yeah, I had no desire to remain. I mean, I just there was a few reasons. One was that the job I wanted to do was not available to me because I didn't have sterling grades. So I really wanted to be this VC fellow, and it was not going to happen. Uh, I tried.
Just kind of side note, I'm curious, why was it important for you? What does it mean to be a VC fellow?
I mean, this probably goes down in another direction that we can definitely talk about, but it's not to the theme. But I mean, essentially, I had always been this like super curious generalist person who had never really found something that I wanted to invest myself in terms of a topic or like a vocation. But I learned very well, I guess, in terms of my education and also how I applied it to myself, like how to think, especially like in sort of narratives and synthesis. And yeah, it seemed very clear to me that in our time, I mean, maybe let's say in our time, meaning 2019, perhaps has already changed. In that time, it seemed like that the thing to do if you are like that was to go into the technology investing world. Probably the earlier stage, the better, because the whole aspect of that is you're supposed to look at a market and find, the right people with the right idea at the right time
Mm.
to build the business that will seize that potential in that market. And yeah, that's not a very quantitative thing, to be honest. It's very much about judging people, understanding others' understanding, right? Like their sort of soft skills, how empathetic they are, how much they can, how good their leadership might be, right? So things like that. Um, and yeah, I mean, that was something that seemed to be what I could be good at, so that's why I pursued it. And
So, because I asked this question because you said you moved to Berlin, you wanted to move to Berlin to
Mhm,
do exactly that
mhm.
without having the cultural context and like only having lived in Europe for a few months.
Yeah.
Why did you think you could even like succeed or like or even understand the tip of the iceberg where it comes to where it's not you said it's not quantitative at all or very
Mhm,
little.
mhm,
So right.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I was naive for sure. Like, when you're that young, and also with me, like with the
What did
sort
you
of
want to learn? Did you want to kind of go and like become immersed in this ecosystem that Berlin offers and kind of become more of like the, I guess, understanding German soul or
Mm,
European soul?
yeah, I think this is a good question, and I probably can't give you a concrete answer of how I even felt at the time. I mean, I think I was sort of very interested in this idea of being like this jet-setting, wealthy European, right? It just has this very glamorous sheen to it, especially for us Americans. We sort of like to, um, yeah, glamorize, I guess, what goes on over here, particularly in the higher echelons. But no, I really like. I was sort of a bit deluded, I think. Yeah, I mean, what you said about the German soul, sure. Like, I've always been interested in like also like psychological and philosophical things, and wanted to also have, yeah, sort of the space and the time to pursue those things as well. I think that was probably a part of it too. I felt that if I stayed in New York, I wouldn't have the bandwidth basically to do other things. I guess what my side vocation ended up being is, I guess, the topic of this. So I guess I was able to find something to do on the side, just was not the thing that I expected. But yeah, I had this kind of conviction, and yeah, it was a lot of self confidence, a lot. I was coming here as a 22-year-old.
You spoke German?
Yeah, I studied German in university, so
Mm.
I had a decent level, but it was not. I was not interacting with people in the industry at the time in German. I think my German now is much much better. I mean, it's conversationally strong now. Before it was not so much. When you learn in the classroom, it's not the same, especially like at a university. It's very kind of theoretical. Um, and I won't get into that. But
Go on.
no, 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 no. It's not necessary. But no, I ended up joining a fund. So yeah. Okay. First thing that was quite absurd was that I arrived here at the very very end of May. It was like the second or last day of May of 2019,
Mm.
and then I began work September 4th. So
You had like a full
I
summer.
had a full summer, except I did not do anything. All I did is that I sat inside.
Again, the good boy kind of cooking for yourself
Yeah,
and
exactly
but
the
no
same.
school though. So what the
Exactly
fuck
the
were you
same
doing?
shit. So I found this apartment. I got really lucky. Was able to like live on my own in like this totally emptied out flat in near Ostkreuz, right between Wilde Granate and About Blank. Literally
And these two are
in the bosom of clubs.
for
Yes,
those their clubs.
yes, they're clubs, quite well known ones. About Blank is one that is like very much aligned with anarchists. A very old and hallowed institution of Berlin has an amazing, very large hof or backyard where in the summertime they have nice parties. And yeah, Renata is also cool. It's very narrow, built into an old apartment building. Yeah, so 5 minutes from both of those places. Did I enter either of those places for the 3 months in the summer? No.
But you it didn't even cross your mind, or you were like, "Oh, I don't wanna get into this, it's gonna distract me,"
No, I
or
had no idea what it was. I had no idea what it was.
okay, so so it wasn't even, like, remotely part of your motivation, to
I mean,
come here, it was just, like, to live it up and experience this,
yeah.
uh, ephemeral.
Yeah, I think I just had this it was a bit of arrogance, I think, as well, that I thought that, the thing that everyone was doing here was not worth my time. It's a classic Max thing.
Mm, I know what
Um,
you mean.
yeah. So I really just spent the summer, like, being sad and, like, watching HBO and smoking cigarettes in my apartment. Um, Honestly, like, such a looking back on it, it's just a real shame. I mean, it's stupid stuff. But I didn't know anyone. I came here. I had no job. I had to find a place. I knew, like, one person, two people, a guy who was doing an internship here who I knew from my studies in Paris, and then my professor, actually, who's a great guy. But he also didn't necessarily lead me to doing anything particularly interesting. I mean, I went to some parties of his that were pretty fun, but for the most part, I was really wasting freedom. You're not one typically does not have a summer completely free when they're 22 years old and one of the funnest cities in the world. So I mean, it's a massive
Whatever happened,
it's
yeah.
a massive
Did
thing
you at least
to miss
travel
out on.
or read something cool or something that kind of
No, I had no money also.
okay, that's,
So I received some money from my graduation. I invested that in, like, buying pots and pans. And I mean, just, like, living expenses, right? Because I wasn't making any money for those 3 months. So no, I didn't travel, actually, at all. I think not once in that time. I was really just around. I mean, I had a kid from my university. Maybe he'll listen to this. What's up, Jens? He was there, and we became friends towards the middle of the summer. And we did have one really cool party, which was maybe, I guess, the first real time I partied it up properly, which was during the Christopher Street Day Parade of 2019. So that's
where was that?
Pride in Berlin.
Okay.
Um, and usually, what happens is that there's this very long parade that goes to the west of Berlin,
Mhm.
starts in, like, Wilmersdorf, southwest corner, and then ends at the Brandenburg Gate, the Brandenburger Tor, in the Tiergarten.
Yeah.
And
The thing that you can see on every postcard from
yeah,
Berlin.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's the classic image of Berlin. And yeah, basically many organizations, both firms and other stuff, they rent out these trucks, these floats, as we call them in American English, and yeah, they invite their employees and their friends to go on there and party, and then people are on the street all around, especially at, like, major points like Nollendorfplatz is where a big congregation happens. It's also the kind of the center of the gay neighborhood of Berlin and Schöneberg. Um,
Really? Whoa, I'm learning so much, man.
yeah. So my friend Jens, he was working at N26, which is a neobank here in Berlin. It's one of the biggest startups here, and they had a truck, of course. So I went with him. Um, I remember so well that day. Actually, I know exactly what I wore. I wore this woman's sleeveless shirt that only went up to my belly button. Very nice garment. Um, and
That's when you felt freedom for the first time
yeah, I did.
coming from America.
It was pretty great. It was pretty great. I mean, we ended up also finding some stuff. I will also never forget that either. We were able to go on and off the truck when we wanted, as
Mm.
long as we would catch up with it later on, which was very cool. And we went off one time, and we were like,
Was there, like, someone, like a bouncer on the truck or
yeah,
yeah,
there was someone that was very. We had maybe wristbands or something like that.
yeah.
And we were off the truck, and we were like, I don't remember exactly how this happened, but we were, like, walking on the street, and we were in this sort of public housing estates here, and we encountered, like, these really sort of rough-looking Israeli guys, and
Mm.
we traded them, I guess, weed for some kind of concoction of ecstasy, speed, and something. I don't know exactly what it was. It was all mixed together. It was not very
Yeah.
not very above brow, and they were.
Chalk.
Yeah, the thing about them was they were very troubled people. It was very clear. I think that one of them had a PTSD, basically, from the army in
Mm.
Israel, and that was also maybe something that I first glimpsed, was, like, kind of who are the people that are coming here and really going full on with this partying and drug taking culture and
Yeah, who are they?
yeah, a lot of broken people, and that was maybe the first time. Who are they? Who are the people who party here?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so as you said, it's everyone. But there are some people who are more invested than others, right? Um, you
You have
know,
this theory of like
mm,
autism and being
mm,
prevalent in this subgroup of people who really get
yeah,
lit up here.
yeah. So I mean, I can talk about this theory, but I mean, one thing that is probably true of most capital cities. And Berlin is not an exception. New York would also be one, not politically a capital, but
Yeah, it
one
is.
nonetheless. Is that it attracts sort of the people who are the most extraordinary people from their towns. So usually you grew up in the countryside somewhere, and like 85-90% of your cohort are going to remain. They're going to live the lives that their parents probably had, more or less. But if you're sort of driven or exceptionally intelligent, whatever, you will probably leave. And Berlin is full of those people, both from within Germany and outside. And they were sort of always these exceptional folks. They were not quite fitting in with the rest of
Mm.
the scene. Maybe it was because they were queer. That would be a very common one in Berlin. It's a very very queer place. Or maybe it was because they
Queer, not odd or like weird, but
queer
queer, like as
queer
in
in
like
sexuality. Yeah.
yeah.
I think that was a very common one. One observation I made from my encounters here in Berlin is that there's a lot of I've met a few people who I guess have been or are very involved in the clubbing scene here, who are like kind of a combination of both queer and also like what's the word? Having foreign-born parents. So
Immigrants
yeah,
or like first
first
generation.
generation. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So maybe they grew up in like a small town in the south of Germany, which would be a very conservative place, and they were probably one of a half dozen brown kids in their school, and they were also like homosexual. That is going to
Uh,
mark you out as a quite extraordinary as you go through high school and so on.
yeah.
And if you happen to have sort of maybe above average intelligence or a drive of some kind, the likelihood of you staying in your dorf, in your village, is very, very low because it's going to be already very unpleasant for you.
And just the fact that you feel or like you are different just kind of pushes you out.
Exactly. And that those kind of people who are feeling different, they come to Berlin, especially those who are German, I would say. And then from other places, it's also similar. I have lots of friends from Milan, for instance. Also a capital of its in some way, and they feel that Milan is not the place for them because they are also a little bit off from like what is sort of normal. They're considered normal, so they come here, and then they also find this kind of community of people who are abnormal from all over the world. So yeah, that's kind of the type of people who come here. And yeah, I mean, I guess this autism thing that you mentioned is something that I've also thought about, which is again very related, right? It's just that when you grow up and you look around and you see people who are all sort of following the same path, and like that fundamental urge to integrate, or I'm forgetting the word, is not something that you feel.
Mm.
That could be a cause of many things. It could be sort of maybe an autistic streak. That sort of the rewards of blending in socially are just not very high for you. Or it could be, as I said, like a sexuality thing or an ethnicity thing. But in general, people who are othered or who are different like to come to Berlin. And following that
Yeah.
is that they find a place where they can go full steam with expressing that otherness. Having dedicated places where they can be really comfortable to be fully realized, to be like as other as they can be, to be themselves.
So interesting. Because like I thought like you can any big city provides like you have it being there's so much diversity in a city like Milan also, right? That you could probably find your crowd, though it would be a subgroup of the population. It seems like here it is kind of the thing
Yeah.
to be different.
Mhm.
Um, Which is like funny, right? Because when everyone is contrarian,
Exactly.
then who's
Then no one
no one is,
then the
right?
people who are not contrarian are contrarian. Yeah, I mean that's very true. I think this place is all about self expression and being yourself. There was a time where I went to Berghain, the very famous club. We'll probably talk about this a little bit more. And I was there with a very good friend of mine from Italy. You know him also. And as we entered, I said, "Be yourself, but more." And I think that was a very good sort of introduction to how
Mm.
one should act there. And it's how a lot of people do go about their experiences there.
Before we go
Yeah.
into the exploration of Berghain,
Mhm.
what? Because you mentioned that moment when you were in that parade and you met the Israeli guys, and then
Mhm.
we kind of went on a little tangent. What does it mean to like the people that come here? But was that the moment when you realized, like, okay, I found my place? Like, was this something you were looking for? Did something click in your mind, or?
No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I remember like being on the top of this bus. I think an executive of N26 was DJing. The sun was setting. Everyone was dancing in the streets. I had taken something that made this quite vivid, but again, I don't know exactly what it was. And I remember it being like really special. I think I have the photos on my Instagram. Um, you remember we
At Max
at Max J Cutler.
Cutler, yeah.
Um, but I didn't it didn't strike me as like, okay, like now this is something that I need to invest myself into. Really not. I think I think after that we were meant to go to Sisyphus,
Mm.
which is another club here in Berlin. It's built at the site of an old dog treat factory. It's like this very big, sprawling
It's like a circus from the outside.
circus. Yeah, very cool place. Very Berlin, very special. Not my favorite place, but interesting nonetheless. And we were supposed to go there with my friend Jens, and we fucked up the entry because we were like a bunch of dudes, so we didn't get it in.
How do you like? What is there some like code, or is can you game the system? Like, what's the way? How do you know that? What do you have to do to be sure that you're gonna get in? Like 99% sure, right? You
I mean,
never.
it depends on the place.
So you can just step back. What are the type of places you mentioned? Like Renate, like it's this and that. Like, what are the categories, or what are the kind of top 10?
I mean, I'm not the best person to talk about this, I think, because I haven't really sampled it so much.
But yeah, even
I have sort of decided the place that I like to go to, or places. But in general, yeah, I mean, there's sort of like, I mean, there are the way that it functions. Like, I'll just kind of do it in a sort of general way. Is that you have clubs and you have parties, and they're two different things.
mm,
So parties are run, managed, developed. There's a better word for it, but I'm promoted. Sorry, promoted by groups, by individuals. Say an example would be Bodies is a party, and the people who run Bodies are like a group or an organization, and they hire a venue. It's usually at a club called Aiden, and then they throw the party there.
mm,
So if you and I are talking about what we're going to do this weekend, and we say, Bodies is happening, we go to Aiden because we want to go to the Bodies party, not necessarily because we want to go to Aiden per se. Then there are other clubs that are not like that. Sisyphus would be an example. Sisyphus never has anything besides their own party,
mm.
and they also never release the names of the DJs who play. It's never a thing. So you just go there. You know that it will be open all weekend from Friday night until Sunday evening, and but there's no special party going on. Take Berghain for instance; it's sort of between that. Fridays you have parties that are typically promoted by groups or individuals. It's a themed night. Maybe it's like Italian disco night is one night. I went to one that was like a collaboration with a club from Georgia, from Tbilisi. It was really cool, actually. They had like also like a rock concert going on the main floor. Very interesting to look at. But then Sunday they always have the same thing, which is Clubnacht, which is like the big party often here in Berlin on the weekends, and that is their own party. They book the DJs. sometimes they follow, maybe, they write these very nice descriptions of what of the party and who's playing every weekend.
They
Can really
stick to it.
can really recommend to it. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and usually, and
I
sometimes
thought because they write these really nice posters, but actually they're not really useful.
no, 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 they are. I mean, they talk about, usually they have like they usually they start by talking about maybe a DJ who's never played before there, who comes from maybe
Mm.
somewhere far away and is like, um, the Bermuda-born and New York living DJ has been experimenting with X, Y, and Z, and brings his sort of melodic up-tempo new act to live to Berghain for the first time. Besides him, there will be regulars such as X, Y, and Z, blah 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 blah, like that kind of thing. But sometimes they're like theme. Maybe they'll have like a bunch of DJs from Southeast Asia coming, or there's a group called Malahunta who has their own Berghain, basically Clubnacht every, I guess, half year or so. But in general, they own the party orchestration process. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so these are the different types, and then you said that you found your type, or like before that, actually, we said there's like there's a certain way to get in, like, or like to avoid, like, what are the dummy rookie mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest one, and this applies also not just to Berlin but other places as
Yeah.
well, is like, don't go with large groups, especially single gendered ones. So that's an obvious one. I think too, it's just like, don't be too fucked up. That's often something that can get you. I mean, I've seen all kinds of weird shit happen in that way. But three, it's like also like about being yourself. Like, don't overdress to the point where you look like you're uncomfortable in your own clothes. I think that also happens sometimes.
Excessive, or like,
Yeah, like, I mean, it depends on where you're going as well. Like, if you're going to Sisyphus, you should probably wear like some colorful stuff that's like festive and fun, carnival vibes, as you said. Berghain, it's best to wear dark colors. Um, be as just as cool as you can be. Let's say, within your own boundaries. Obviously, people also wear like sort of fetish stuff sometimes as well. But that's because they like wearing it, and that's why they come there with it. But not necessarily, they don't do it to orchestrate getting in per se. I don't think that usually works for
you never
people.
know.
It can work, of course. Yeah.
What is this coolness effect? Because it seems like some of these people are just like, they really are into that scene because it's also cool.
Mm.
You like that word also. You use it quite often. So
Yeah, yeah, indeed. It's also cool. Let's say that it's used in German in the exact same way as it is in English without any translation. People just say cool. But no, I mean, what is it? I guess for me, it was always like this aspect of authenticity, of self recognition and understanding, and realization as well. I guess, I mean, maybe it rests on this sort of stupid premise, which is that to look interesting or look unique, you must know yourself well in order to do so.
mm.
Which I think is not actually true. I think you
I
can.
also want to say I disagree.
Yeah, you can get there without that. But no, in general, I think that's sort of the idea. Obviously, like in Berlin, it's pretty easy to determine like what's quite uncool and what's cool. I mean, the uncool is like the venture capitalists, wearing vests and allbirds and like slacks and stuff like that. They're not looking very cool, and that's very obvious.
But they still get in.
No, they don't, unless they have another side to them. I mean, some people do. I've been with them before, but not if they don't develop a personality outside of their sort of work existence. And being in that scene, especially as an investor, the one of the reasons why I guess the job pays well, although not very well in Germany. I don't know if people know that. Is that you have to do it. Your whole life is consumed by it. You're working all the time in different times of the day. You're going to dinners every night to network and shit like that. So your social circle becomes people who are also investors or who are founders. So everything in your life is basically like that. You have to take great pains and be very diligent about finding other environments to be in. So yeah, you become uncool.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, some can get out of it, but not typically. Not typically. Um, yeah.
What's there are these legends of people going into a club on Friday and coming out on Sunday
Hmm.
afternoon
Monday.
or Monday. How does it work? It's not like they have a hotel in there or like beds, right?
Mhm. So I guess the question is how does a
I mean,
marathon
obviously,
session work?
yeah. How does a marathon session work? And we can also, I also had a question about like drugs because they're kind of illegal here, but everyone uses them. And like, how do you go about it, like to be safe also?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, the opening question is like,
Yeah. So I think, I mean, the marathon sessions are something that you can't just start from scratch. It's like running a marathon. If you just
is that the official name for it?
a marathon sesh, I think that's what I call it. Yeah. Sesh is definitely the word for sure.
Yeah.
How the adjective in front of it is your choice. Um, no, I mean, you have to scale up to it. Like you can't just run a 5K once and then think you can do a marathon. Same idea with this. But after doing it for weeks over week, and maybe not every week, but like two or three times in a month, progressively going longer and longer, you get to build the stamina, and like your body really reacts. I mean, this is something that I'm going through right now, so to say. It's honestly very interesting. I don't know. It's not like per se healthy, but I'm also like very fit in my own way right now. But like I don't know, it's a very strange thing to talk about, and a very strange thing for me to also feel, as it's my body.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, essentially, you start. I mean, Berlin has this a small aside. Berlin has this magical quality, which is that nights that usually end at 2 or 3 in most other places here, they last twice as long. It's just, and this is not even to say like you're in a club or anything, although that obviously happens as well. But just like you could be at a house party and it's the next thing
It's
you know,
no
the
tomorrow.
sun's up. I mean, it just happens all the fucking time. Um,
Why do you think that that is so?
there's something spiritual in it. It's the way the winds blow or something. I don't really know. It's very odd. I mean, maybe there's something to do with like socioeconomic dynamics or whatever the fuck. But like,
Yeah.
I think it's something that's very deep in the city and like that it's in the air or something. But yeah, the sessions, how do they work? Yeah, I mean, basically, I don't know, like they just happen. Like I guess one's body, when they're used to the drugs, they start metabolizing them differently than if you're not used to them. Where you can maybe extract more like sustaining force from it, so to say.
But you're not dancing 20 or like 48 hours straight up.
I mean, I dance for most of it. I'm not the type of person who goes to the club and like hangs out and like chats with people at the bar. People do that; it's no problem. But I'm not like that.
Mm.
I'm dancing. No, I mean, I don't know. I can talk about a recent marathon sesh, which sort of is indicative of how this works. I mean, basically, start off. I was at my favorite bar. Shout out Nathaniel and Heinrich, of course. Heinrich, excuse me. Um, had a drink there with my friend who works there. This was like 7 o'clock on Saturday. Headed over to a birthday party. Was hanging out with people there, drinking some wine, very relaxed. Then it gets about, midnight, 1-ish, probably somewhere in between. And then people start, asking each other if they want to start taking some drugs. The drug here is methadone, which is a very stimulating one. It's sort of in between coke and ecstasy. Or ecstasy and MDMA. Sorry, no, coke and ecstasy. Yes. And yeah, that starts happening. The time starts moving a lot faster. Kind of the last people start showing up to the party. Then it's like 3:30, 4 a.m. People are like, let's go out. Like it's time to go out now. Then there's a few parties that started around midnight that are probably going to close around 6 a.m., 7 a.m. So, definitely viable to go out at that point. We went to a party at a club called Suicide Circus. We're there for like 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Wasn't the sickest party, so we
What is a sick party for you? Like Suicide Circle, there was a DJ, probably music, people dancing.
Yeah, I mean the crowd, I would say, is the probably the thing that
Mm,
inhibits or prohibits this the most. Um, there, it was not necessarily people who had like amazing energy or who were dancing very well, who were particularly beautiful or graceful. Those are all things that I think are very, very important. Um, maybe it was because there wasn't a lot of drug taking. I don't know. You could say that. I think if you to compare that party to maybe other
have you ever
parties that
been to one of the parties that you've frequented quite often places, um, but in a different state? Whereas, like, say, usually you went there sober, and then you once went like on like some substance, and you felt okay, wow. But also the vice versa. Have you ever gone to a party like this without taking anything?
Um, yes, and it's not nearly as fun. I mean,
Okay.
it has to be said, at least from my perspective. But maybe this is also one warped by my own
Yeah.
existence. But like, these places exist to trip, so to say. Not they don't exist solely for the purpose. Like,
Yeah.
of course not. But like, they are designed to facilitate this,
Mm,
and people around you are also doing it. And for that reason, I mean, I don't know if you've ever interacted with someone when you're sober and they're like very high on like MDMA or things like that. I'm sure you have. It's very hard. You're not like,
mm.
the energies, the vibes, the spirits are just really at different places. It's not very fun. Um, so
But also for people who like it's the same experience when like someone is super wasted and you're sober,
yeah,
right?
exactly. So you want to be around people who are sharing your energies, and that makes it all much more fun. It makes it interactive. You're not surrounded by NPCs. Like there's other sort of heroes or protagonists around you.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think what I kind of like to do is so going back to this marathon. After suicide, we left the party around. I guess it was yeah, it was after 7 a.m. So this is now Sunday morning. The sun was up already, and we went to Berghain. First, we stopped in my apartment. It's right on the way, and we went there. The line was not so long, but my friends who I was with, they ended up wanting to leave actually, so they left. I stayed in the line. A friend of mine joined.
How long is
Um,
the line
a
on
VC, a
this?
VC. Yes.
How long is the line on a Sunday morning?
It really depends. It depends on the time. It depends on who's playing. It can be anywhere from no line, or like 10 people to, um, I don't know, I can't even,
Yeah, long.
two or three American football fields in length. So yeah,
Whoa.
300 meters, 350
And
meters.
you get in one by one.
And yeah, they sort you one by one. So a line like that will take 5 hours to go from the beginning to the end.
So just to explain to other people, you're in the line, and then you're not acting like, or you're trying to act cool. You even if you might be with someone, you are kind of not talking to each other the closer you get to the bouncer, right?
Yeah, you can talk until like more or less like the first 20 people.
And then you get frisked by the bouncer, then you get your ticket, right?
Yeah, so you stand in front of the tour. You states for dem tour, and they give you your fate. And I personally think that these bouncers are also like kind of spiritual. They they are able to see into your soul.
They stare into your eyes, or
They don't have. I mean, sometimes they just see they see. I mean, you talked about how you behave when you're close to the front. They do look not just at the person being nominally looked at as the person right in front of the door, but they also look beyond, and they see how
see
you're
through you.
they see how you're walking, what your posture's like. Do you look confident or not? Um, yeah, they see it all, and they're by if you were to say that, so it's pretty clear that the best DJ acts are playing in Berghain. I
Hmm.
think that's rather understood. I would say the club is also, in terms of how it's designed, is also best in class.
Going back to the marathon and design, like, do they have like areas for you to like chill out? Like,
Yeah,
say it's 9 a.m. Methadone, like you're out of it, like you just feel like fuck, man, I want to pass out for 2 hours and go back dancing. Can you do that, or
yeah. So there's an ice cream bar.
Mm.
in Berghain. Very an amazing place, honestly. It's right on top of the main floor. It's like this little oasis, like well lit. They have like six different flavors, really some delicious stuff. I think I forgot what it was. That's super good. It's like a vanilla candy thing. Can recommend it. It's white. Get that one. And they also have like smoothies and like things like that, which can really help you wake up. It's called like the breakfast smoothie. It's very heavy. There's lots of like grains and antioxidants and uh, I think like probably also supplements makes you strong, wakes
So
you
if
up.
you wanted to, you could like wake up on a Sunday morning feeling fresh, you haven't taken anything,
Mm.
and instead of going to your usual smoothie place, you just go to Berghain, get your smoothie, listen to some cool music, and then leave. But hmm,
Yeah, why not?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's very tasty. It's also reasonably priced. I think it's nice. Um, yeah, and that can definitely help you when it comes to your marathons. I mean, also you can bring some food in. I often bring apples. It's kind of like in my,
Should people have like vault bags or like deliver? Really? Like,
no. You can't get food delivery in, but you can when you come. It's advised, I would say, to bring a bag with you for change of clothes, for instance, and
because you're
because
staying there for the full marathon.
yeah, I mean, if you're these clubs are not the cleanest places. I wouldn't. It's not very cool to walk out in what you came in with. I would say. I mean, in the summer it's different, I guess, because it's it's fine. But like in the winter as well, also you're going to have to change. So there's a garderobe that's also amazingly managed. It's one of the marvels of the city. It's amazing how
Mm.
it works. It's like so wide open. There's so much space. They're really fast in how they work, process everyone super quickly. It's never a choke point. At other clubs, it can be a massive choke point. Sisyphus, for instance, it's like this little tiny window, and if it's kind of late in the evening and a lot of people are leaving, it's an hour wait to get your codex. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyways, and yeah, you can bring like apples and stuff. They have bananas at the ice cream bar as well. But yeah, apples are like it's like in Minecraft when you're low health, you eat it and you get your meter up. You really feel it. Um, but on this occasion, I didn't have an apple. I didn't bring it with me. But I still managed. And yeah, basically with that is that I stayed. So I arrived there around 9 a.m., 8:30 inside, and then I stayed until 8 p.m. And after 12 afternoon, I didn't take anything else. And that was actually like that to me is like kind of the best thing to do is like kind of do what you need to do and then let it go. And like sort of I call it the verlängerung, which means like extra time, like an extension. And it's where like it's like in soccer when they add on a time at the end of the game. And it's like it's not necessarily the game, but it's also not the game.
Mm.
And there you're still sort of in your body feeling things like you're not tired, like you have energy, but in your head you're much more lucid and you're really kind of getting things. Um, I like that, and that's what I did that time.
Is there so you're there, you're dancing, you're doing your thing, you're enjoying yourself for like, it's a lot of time, like 12 hours. But again, like if someone needs that, I guess that's, or if some people stay in there for longer. And there is a ceremony or there is some ritual when it comes to the entry point. What about the exit?
No, there's no
Just
real
grab your shit
ceremony.
and leave.
Yeah, you get you. It's best to sort of phase your way out. I mean, it's very intense. So have a few cigarettes, casually, slowly change, get everything together, and then yeah, you just walk out and you're back into the world.
And there's none of that stuff like, say, clubbing in the US, right? When you go to the club and you just get ridiculously wasted. Most of the like that's how people do it, and then usually you leave with someone also, right? And that's what I'm curious. Like, does it, or do you kind of once you're in there, you are in this other almost like reality, or like you're just you're extracted from whatever your day to day is, and you meet the people that you want to meet over there, but like because everyone over there like puts on this mask or like takes off all their masks, right? And
Mhm.
they're supposed to be themselves. Um, you also figure that you probably wouldn't be have that vibe with same energy that you have with them at a given moment when you're at the club. Outside of it, that's why you can, if you vibe with someone, you do your thing over there, like you get close, you talk, whatever, but you very rarely leave the club with that person because odds are that you wouldn't want to be with that person in the real world.
Yeah, I'm not so certain about this. Like, I can speak from my own experience, which is that very rarely have I left with someone that I didn't know. I have, but it's not. I mean, this is like it's really like an interesting question. I mean, like, these spaces are I think not necessarily for like hooking up per se. They're meant to
What are
be
they for then?
they're meant to be places for music to be played and to be appreciated first and foremost.
Mm.
Then second, I would say it's a space for people to be comfortable with this, with their self-expression, with sort of realizing themselves as much as they want to be, and also like maybe tripping, so to say, in order to do that or to make that more vivid of an experience. Um, yes, these drugs also engender, let's say, horniness or a desire to touch people and be close with them, and that obviously happens. But rarely do things come outside of the club. I think something that would be more likely is that you go there, you see someone that you already know from
Mm.
maybe from work or from a mutual friend, and then maybe from that you would want to leave. But again, it's like, yeah, not gonna be the most likely thing, but of course it happens, and I think it depends also probably on the venue that you're at for sure as well.
What about safety and substance taking? How does it work? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that you have to learn. Like, what are your limits? What's most comfortable for you? What you were looking for in that particular session? Yeah, in general, I mean, again, depending on where you're at, there are people who are very experienced, so they know exactly what to take at what time and how much. So they have no hangups. But for people who are younger, maybe, or who are less experienced, it's really important to be there with people who know what's going on. I can say that I have often not been with other people, so I had to figure it out for myself, which is not easy because sometimes yeah, I mean, being high alone is not always amazing. Let's say, but it can also be, but it's not always. But yeah, in general, you sort of learn by watching others and by trying for yourself, seeing what's kind of good for you. But again, also if you do this very often, you gain a certain tolerance. You sort of understand what's going on. I mean, depends on what you take as well. But like one of the big drugs of Berlin partying is ketamine, of course. And ketamine is like much
Why,
more.
of course.
I mean, it really, like, the way it works on the body, I think is like it's like the perfect storm for electronic music and dancing,
Mm.
particularly when it's taken in with a stimulant as well. Um, a friend, or a guy that I met very recently who has become a friend, he describes it as fecundity. Do you know that word? Fecund?
I do. I've heard it a few times, but I
Yeah,
don't
it
know what it
means basically
means.
like fertile. It's like you would call
Mm.
like a plant that is sprouting fecund. And yeah, it really works like that. But the thing is about it is that it's episodic. So you take it, you sort of feel it for a period of time, depending on your tolerance and how much you take. It can be a few minutes, an hour, hour and a half or so, and then it ends. And then you probably will take a break, chat with some friends, have a cigarette or two, maybe get some
Mm.
ice cream if you want, and then
Have an apple.
and then when you feel compelled, you'll start the next episode if you want. And like that's also sort of maybe how you asked about the marathon and how it works. It's like it's not necessarily a movie, but it's like binge watching, um, and yeah, that makes it a little bit easier to swallow. I think if you're uh, say you're at some seaside bar in Greece somewhere, you're probably just drinking or whatever. It's not so episodic. If you get sober, you get sober, and then I mean you can get drunk again, I guess, but like it doesn't work in the same way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how this works. That's how the tiredness sort of gets evaded because you just have these mini sessions within the session usually. But also like if it's a shorter party, like say you're there from 2 to 6, then very well you just might have one big session. That's also fine.
And
And
you mentioned like you first went to Suicide Circle and then
circus.
circus and then to Berghain.
Mhm.
Does that usually happen, or once you kind of get into a club, you kind of settle on it, and or is club hopping a thing in Berlin?
I mean, I think it depends on the day and like the also like yeah. So if it's Saturday night, most of the parties will end in the 6, 7, 8 in the morning, and then if you want to continue, the places to go are to Berghain, which begins at midnight on Saturday and ends Monday morning, or you can go to Sisyphus, which is also running all weekend without stop.
Only these two.
Um, yeah, I think those are the only two that do that.
Did you have like I don't know, like cleaning people coming in like every 6 hours, like
Yeah,
mopping the floor, some shit like
In
this?
Berghain, they often close the bathrooms and then they clean them. It's a very cool feature. Also, I remember once
Nice.
a friend was like sort of stuck in the stall. Um, yeah, but no, overall, yeah, they do clean them, and it's good that they do it. Um, yeah, so that's kind of how it works, but it really depends. Also, I mean, sometimes you have like special weekends or times, like for instance, New Year's. There will be a half dozen parties that will be lasting for 24 or 36 hours.
Mm.
Berghain will be for 2.5 days. So, you know, there will be some hopping.
So you started off with you being in Berlin for a full summer, doing fuck all and just sitting in your apartment watching HBO and smoking cigarettes, to now having experienced a bunch of or the best of what Berlin has to offer.
Mm.
What's your if you had to kind of take a step back and reflect on that time?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what are your reflections?
From like the whole time from
Yeah,
my
from like
arrival until now.
the from your arrival, the transition, and how like the Berlin club scene, how did it influence it, or what role did it play?
That's a great question. I mean, I think um, my entry into this was musical. I think at first I was like, I started to understand how the music can affect one like emotionally, and also how it moves one physically. That was the beginning of it.
Mm.
Um, but then then it maybe became a little bit more about like tripping, so to say. Tripping in order to find oneself, in order to get sort of answers to these questions that have been bothering one. And yeah, I sort of set out to do that, and I think the biggest lesson that I've learned, and this is only something that I've kind of come upon recently, is that like I was looking to understand how I can love myself, and I initially deluded myself very much and like did it in a very wrong way, in that I got very arrogant about the things that I was good at and that I was excelling at. The fact that I was doing these marathon sessions, or that I was meeting these really interesting people, or that I was making out with these attractive girls, whatever. Um, I got really deluded into like loving that, and like that became my entire existence. Also because I was spending so much time doing it, and like it became so
Mm.
important for me. But then I was completely neglecting like my insecurities, my flaws, whatever, and not also loving those. So I like halfway through this period, which basically began in early April or so, and I guess continues to today. I was like, man, I'm so fucking cool. I met this guy in Greece, an older gentleman from the far west of Germany, from the Eifel. And I was like telling him that I was the besondere Typ, which means the special man, the special guy. And explaining about how all this shit that I was doing and how cool I was.
And he
And
was like, "Beat it, kid," or
no,
not?
he fucking loved it, but like, you know, that's another story.
Yeah.
But that's another thing about me. Sometimes I can tell very good stories and make it very convincing. But what I was totally missing from this was that I was not self-loving myself at all, but I was like firing myself up with like this crazy existence that was sort of justifying the neglect of my flaws, like to recognize them and to accept them and to go with them. And I don't think that I'm alone in this delusion.
I don't think you are, man. I think everyone is trying to get to a point where they fully love themselves, all the positive and negative sides of one's personality.
Of course, of
Um,
course. But I think going
Physical
back,
traits, yeah.
yeah, when you asked about sort of the demographic of these clubs, like I was talking about the people who come from who are queer or who are different. They have a lot of I don't know, anxiety or self hatred that's part of their complex our complexes, and it's not so surprising that they seek these locations, yes, to realize themselves, to have this experience. But I think that's also like a bit of a diluting thing as well to do.
I think something that's also interesting is that, speaking of demographics, it's not like you think of a club in, say, in New York or in London. It's most likely going to be people in like their 20s, maybe early 30s. But like here, it seems like you can get people who are in their 40s and 50s also.
For
It's
sure.
not restricted to age. Why do you think that is? I think that's one of the special things that I realized in Berlin is about the clubbing scene here. It's that it's yeah, just anyone.
Yeah, no, that's true. Um, why is that the case? I mean, you have a lot of people here who don't grow up Peter Pans. Um, that this is not a place that demands that of you. Like in most other places, especially going back to the village example. I mean, if you think about it, if you live in a village and you don't get married and have children, I mean, what the fuck are you gonna do? Like, I don't know, like, there's not a lot of activities to
Mm,
to take, to consume your time with. But if you live in a place like Berlin, which is all about offering stuff to do, nightlife, arts, whatever, then it's not a it's not a it's not as it's a simpler or it's not a simple choice. It's a more compelling choice not to follow the more traditional path of kids and such. On top of this, you have lots of homosexual people here who probably are going to be unlikely to have kids or less likely to have kids than heterosexual couples. Um, so yeah, in general, you have a lot of people who, either never settle with someone, so remain, sort of single or exploring different arrangements for relationships, polyamory and the like. Or you have people who do settle down with someone, but they don't pursue the family idea really at all. So you have money, you have time, and you have connections and access. I mean, what are you going to do? You're gonna go to the best places and have fun.
mm,
Um, so this is a very, very, very common thing in Berlin. I mean, again, Berlin is a very big place with lots of different people. I think you have also tons of people who do have families and who are living as more or less people do in Düsseldorf, say, or Hamburg.
yeah,
But you also have the segment that is probably also more concentrated in the more creative industries, let's say, who eschew this really, and they make their decisions. They look at themselves in the mirror. They're maybe 32, 35. You know, the biological clock is ticking. The time is now to decide, and they say, I'm content to try to be 30 for as long as possible. Um, I don't think that's for me. I'm quite young in this scene, to be honest. Like when I meet people, they're always very surprised at how old I am. Um, I kind of look older, so I get to seem like that. But in general, I'm not really so down with this. I think it's important to develop, new interests and to, yeah, not do the same shit in your whole life. So, yeah, that's my perspective on it. But it definitely happens, and I get it as well. Like, I think if you're um, in a homosexual relationship and you're not so keen on adoption or whatever. I mean, you gotta just stuff to do. I mean, you gotta find stuff to do, and like this is this is something to do, and it's also like inherently a kind of queer oriented as well.
mm.
So it really makes a lot of sense. But again,
I usually ask. it's like a closing question. Like, what's your advice? But for the purpose of this conversation, kind of, I'll put it on like a maybe uh one track, which is what's your advice in terms of finding yourself or oneself, especially if you kind of having the context of wanting to be or like doing what you're supposed to do when you're in Paris, right? To like now, like exploring and feasting on life, right? Almost go as far as describe what you're doing right now. Um, yeah, what's your advice?
I think this is going to be a bit of a cop out, but it seems like the right thing to say. It's to uh, be kind to others, and most importantly to yourself. Um, it's very much on the self love track, right? But I think if I'm recalling the Paris experience or those first few months in Berlin, I think I was not so kind to myself either, especially in the Berlin time, because I was like feeling, I was like beating myself up that I didn't have the job that I wanted immediately. Like, these things take time. You can't expect it to be so fast. But I was like, man, like, I'm not working, so therefore I shouldn't be having fun. It's like, not a very kind thing to do to oneself. I think similar in Paris. I was in a relationship with someone who was back home, so that also influenced my how I was doing things. But I think in general that's the best piece of advice is like certainly be kind to others because they will help you on your journey and they will make it more fun and more supportive and there will be more love around you. But most importantly, be kind to yourself. Recognize like your limits, recognize your achievements, recognize the shortcomings, and yeah, don't be too hard. I guess would be a good way of putting it.
All right, Max. Thanks.